Hi, everybody. Here we are for another episode of Visual Wilderness, and tonight we're doing a critique for our leading lines assignment for the month. We are here, Jay and I are here with Johnny and Brent. Let me do a quick introduction, and then we're just going to jump right into it because these critiques always take longer than we hope, and we don't want to keep you guys here all night. So we have the amazing Johnny Spencer. His website is johnnyspencer.com. That is JOHNY Spencer.com. And then there's Brent Mail, the amazing Brent Mail. He is at brentmailphotography.com. There's Jay Patel, my amazing significant other, at jpatelphotography.com. And there's little old me at photographybyverena.com.
All right, let's get started with the critique. So, as always, we were always stunned by the number of images we got and the variety of the images we got. So I'm going to start the screen share and go right into the critique. So give me a second to open my screen. And the assignment was leading lines. And for people who want to learn more about leading lines, we have a number of blog posts on Visual Wilderness, so you can just go to visualwilderness.com, look for the blog post, and you will actually be able to see all the stuff we have for leading lines, including a little short video I believe we created a while ago.
Yep.
Anyway, so here's a first image. So the way this is arranged, overview of how we're going to do the critique is first three images are actually good examples of leading lines. And then we're going to jump into other examples that we will comment and critique on so that you will see what makes an effective leading line image and what makes not so effective leading line image. So I will start off with this image, and Reina, why don't you do the honors and go with the first image critique, and I'll read the second image critique.
So this is a shot from Michael Hall. He happens to be a buddy of ours. We met him down in Australia, and of course his beautiful wife Diane too. This shot, what I love about it is that Michael didn't use, your typical leading lines, right? He used this rock, this shape, which is not, I don't know quite how to say it, but it's not like it's not a direct line pointing anywhere, and yet it is definitely leading us into the image. It's pointing us straight in, and I think everybody can understand what I'm saying, even if perhaps I'm not being all that eloquent in my explanation. Wow. But first of all, you've got this rock pointing into the distance, and you've got these clouds that are kind of leading you down towards the horizon. This image is beautiful. You've got the lines of the surf pointing you in, pulling you into the center of the image, and I think it all combines to create a feeling of, I mean, for me, I would just want to walk out and stand on that rock and let those waves crash against the rock at my feet. It just feels like I'm in the scene, and that's what makes it so effective. It's a wide-angle lens. The wide-angle lens enhances the leading lines or the feeling of depth in the image, and it leaves me feeling like I'm part of the scene. I'm right there. I can see these details at my feet, and they just they make me feel like, one more step and I can feel the sand on my bare feet.
All right, so there is one other thing I wanted to point out to everybody.
Oh, did we lose you, Jay?
No, I'm sorry. I just stopped because my screen disappeared. So, all right. So what I wanted to point out to everybody is the leading line in this image is formed by two or three distinct elements. One element is a contrast between this dark rock and the light background. So you can just see that this actually creates sort of a pointed arrow shape, creating leading lines. Another element is these little shapes over here, small shapes, but they all are pointing in the one direction. They're sort of oblong, pointing in the same direction. So if you have a lot of leading lines, a lot of short leading lines, but they all point in the same direction, your mind sort of puts this together. It's what we call a Gestalt principle, and it creates a sort of similar a mental image of a line or a shot going together. A great example of that is in the assignments page. If you go and click on the examples we have shared, there's a bunch of clay or mud squares that we use, and all of those squares together sort of form a leading line. Although there is no actual line, but these little shapes form a leading line. So if you guys want to go there, go check the assignment page out, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a black and white image, beautiful image by Verena Patel.
Thank you.
And the third element is this multiple streaks of clouds. The leading lines over here are created by a wide angle. They all point into one direction. So all of those three elements, they all point at the same place or a similar place, somewhere over here on the horizon. And that is why this shot is an incredibly effective shot of leading lines example.
Yeah, just a side note, guys. One thing I do love about this image, and it's not particularly to do with leading lines, is I love the cool tones, you know, in the sky, the cool blues and the yellowy sands. I just love those contrasting colours. Actually, it's you know, rather than the big, everyone likes the big colourful sunset, you know, sunrise, but I actually like that time just before with that blues and the yellows. That's one thing that really appeals to me about this image.
I agree. I agree. Those complementary colors really work. And, you know, the little touches of other color, too. I mean, the greens are really beautiful and natural. They're not oversaturated, you know. So I think that the post-processing in this shot is really masterfully done, too, which helps a lot. You know, the colors feel real, natural, just gorgeous.
And I want to point out that Michael is one of our guest authors. And he has written a great blog post about Google, how to scout locations using Google Maps. And he has another blog post coming up this month as well, a fantastic blog post. So keep a lookout for it, and our guest authors are doing awesome.
Yeah, big thank you to our guest authors. They've been amazing.
All right, so let's look at another example, and I'm going to go first and comment on some of these. Now in here, there are multiple leading lines as well. One is a very low contrast leading line created by this wave. And another one is a high contrast leading line, which is created by the combination of the water hitting the sand and throwing up a splash. And both of these lines, if you notice, they all point in the one direction. Now, one can argue that these little pine trees create leading lines as well, but not quite as obvious as the leading lines that emanate from the center or from the foreground and sort of go all the way into. This pine tree sort of creates a leading line, but it isn't long enough. And this is something that we will talk about in the images that is coming up.
I actually feel like that palm there in the distance, that's almost what everything's pointing to, and I love that about it, because the stem, or the trunk rather, of the palm tree, you know, is sort of pointing right up to that spot. Both of the leading lines pull me into that palm, and it feels like it gains a little bit more importance because of that. Agreed.
But the other thing that I wanted to point out is that if you look at contrast Michael shots over here with I'm going to butcher the name, so I apologize, Vizarian's shot over here, the leading lines with Michael's shots, especially in the foreground, are permanent, right? Because it's a rock structure, it's not going anywhere. The leading lines in this shot are temporary and last only a fraction of a second. So when you're trying to catch something like this and create a leading line which are temporary, you have to time that shot just correctly.
Yeah, awesome, guys, and I really like that, and I love the slow shutter speed too, with the wave crashing against those rocks and like jumping up like that too. The only thing that with this image that I'm not 100% that I don't like is on the top right over there where the palm tree actually comes out of the edge. There's no, like, I would rather have it framed a little bit more, maybe just more to the right, just so you can see where the palm tree actually touches the tops of the trees there and comes out. You know, just that's the only criticism I would have for this image.
I completely agree. I also don't like the fact that the top of the palm is cut off. So I may have just cloned it out or actually actually used a composition which doesn't include it in my final image. But agreed, good point, Brent. All right, shall we move on to the next one?
Sure thing.
All right. The next one is also example of leading lines, which is an excellent example. And Adil over here has created awesome shots. I love the colors in the sky.
Yeah.
The total range is fantastic. And one of the things I do want to point out about leading lines is when you have multiple leading lines, as with Michael's shots and Vizarian's shot and Adil's shot over here, they all should point into a sort of a single spot or a single area in the frame. If the leading lines are pointing all different directions, then they will lose the impact of becoming sort of a cohesive leading line that guides the viewer to look at a particular spot or towards the sunset or sunrise, and maybe the case.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And I think in this particular shot, the the reflection lines on the water are pulling me in. The line at the edge of the beach there is pulling me in. I love the reflected light all along those rocks. And then of course, you have this point where everything converges.
Correct.
It's such a wonderful sense of depth here. So I think it's just beautifully done, Adil.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just to say too, that point where everything meets is actually the lightest part of the image where the sun is as well. So that all helps. The lightest part of the image draws your eye, and those lines just pull you straight to it. Yeah, amazing. I love it.
Agreed. Well done shot. So so now we're going to go into the shots where we are going to talk about leading lines and some different criteria for leading lines. So since I did the last two shots, I'll let Verena go with this one.
So this is from Betty Hodges. The color tone in this image is just so rich, Betty. I love it. And the reason we chose this image, actually there are a few reasons, but the big reason is that there's a leading line here that's really kind of neat. You have these smooth lines running through the water that are sort of creating a pattern, but what really stands out to me is that there's this log on the left that points me in towards this collection of rocks and the debris in the water and more rocks, and then of course this little streak of white foam on the surface of the water, and it takes me around. It makes me, it just walks me right through that image, and it's wonderful. And not only that, there's a larger rock there at the bottom on the left-hand side of the frame, and it has a little point to it, and it points me right up to the log to get me started on that curve into the image. This is a different kind of leading line. It's not an existing leading line in nature. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I guess it is existing, but it's made up of other pieces. If you stood somewhere else within the frame, you might not, or I should say, if you stood somewhere else around the edges of the scene, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pull out that leading line. It's the fact that you stood in this spot a few feet left or right, and that rock at the lower left wouldn't point to the log anymore. I mean, it all just comes together to create this line that runs through the image. I love this shot. The foreground rocks to me are such a wonderful addition to the image. They I don't know, they create this amazing sense of depth, I guess. They're right there in my face. They're right next to me, and it feels like there's a barrier. And then you step across that, and you're in this beautiful flowing water. I just think this is a lovely shot. So Jay, what did you want to add to that?
I wanted to add that, does anybody between three of us see a curve that starts with this rock and goes around?
Yep.
Or is it just me?
Yeah, I sure do. Yeah.
No, I see a circle, Jay, all the way around.
I see a circle like this that goes across. Its starting point is this, and it kind of goes across.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to point out that this is because of the perception that our brain creates that connects the dots that are similar in color or tone Now, if you look at the reason this circle, it sort of appears as a circle, is the color of this rock and this rock and this rock and this log, and some of these rocks over here, which are smaller, they're all a similar color, while the background on the other side is a single color, which is this rich yellow. So my mind wants to connect these circles together, or connect these dots together.
We look for figures that we know. We look for familiarity. And so this is, our brains taking something that is made up of distinct parts and trying to create a simplified subject. It's we know circles. We all know circles. It's a simple shape, and so it's creating that. That's why we tend to see faces in weird places. We see a face on the moon. We see I don't know what, Jesus in our cheese sandwich, right? So we're looking for those familiar subjects in everything. It's how our minds simplify the world and categorize.
And if you guys want to know more about that, how our minds categorize, we have a good book called Gestalt, Principles of Perception, that actually shows how we use these familiar shapes and similarity principles to create lines where there are none. And Betty has done this very well. I have to say, this is my favorite image of yours, Betty. I mean, you have some awesome shots on. In fact, the shot that you posted, the second shot you posted or contributed to this assignment is I like it much better. But this is a learning image, which gives us an opportunity to talk about these similarity principles that weren't quite there in the other image that you posted.
Another thing that I love about this image, Jay, is it's different to most landscape images. Most landscape images have, the blues and the greens and the cooler colors in there, and this has just got the yellows. That the tonal range is different to what you normally see in landscape photos.
Yep. All right. We're moving on to the next image.
Yeah, we have another shot. This one's from Gary Forner.
Yep. Go ahead, Verena.
All right. So Gary's shot here, if you stand in this particular position, you get this beautiful reflection in the water, right? And it's gorgeous. And then you've got this leading line of the tree. But unfortunately, I feel like the leading line is taking me away from the subject, off to the right-hand side of the image. I love everything about this image except for that, because I feel like it takes me away from the subject. Now, of course, the problem is if I step to the right until that leading line starts to feel like it's pointing towards the mountain, then my reflected mountain is almost certainly going to be a mess.
In the tree.
It's going to be in the tree or in the weeds or whatever, in the little branches of the tree. And so it ruins the reflection. This is the spot, I think, for this image. But how do you guys feel about that leading line? I'm interested to hear what the rest of you think, because to me it takes me away from the subject, and so it takes away from the image.
Yeah, me too, Verena, exactly. And that's what I probably would have done, was maybe look for another area in the lake. Maybe there's a leading line that can come in from the sky. So maybe you can go back a little, or somewhere where there's some branches, higher than the photographer, and they can actually lead you in from the top left, and you can still get the reflection of the mountain in the water.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I got a quick question for you guys. I mean, this is a quick question, a broad question about photography. Say this was the only position you could capture this image, and yes, it's not the perfect composition with the leading line. I mean, what decisions do you make leading up to that? Sometimes you just need to take the shot and capture. I mean, it's still a beautiful image. You know what I mean? Even though it's not everything that's fallen together perfectly. So what's your advice in that situation, guys?
So I'll give you my advice and then see if you guys can chime in. From a photography perspective, if I were to critique this photo without just the focus on leading lines, there are a few things that I would say. The foreground, in my opinion, is very busy. The leading line, although it is effective, it points away or out of the image, which is not quite the right way to do it. So what I would do is I would actually simplify the shot. I would actually step into the water, jump over that log, go past those grasses, and just perhaps include the reflection and reflections only. And then get rid of the tree and the log, everything. Or if you are too afraid to go in the water because there are piranhas in there, step to the right, step to the left of the log and try to just get the reflections. The shot is incredibly effective as is. Is it effective as a good example of leading line? I would say not so.
And I think to add to Johnny's, add to an answer to Johnny's question, I think for me, what I have found is that although I often will take a photo like this, in the end, it doesn't make it into my portfolio. It doesn't make it into my, top photos, because I find that I agree with Jay.
The choices you make when you're framing up your composition, and I totally agree with what Jay said. I probably would have stepped to the left there and tried to get just a simple reflection. I think that would have been a much stronger final image. But again, that comes down to working the scene and taking a few different shots. Shooting some portraits, shooting some landscapes, and moving position, moving your tripod up and down, and just really working the scene.
And that's what I would do, Johnny. Maybe go in a little closer, and also put your tripod a little higher so that the leading line tree is actually not going all the way to the other trees in the background. So just positioning myself a lot higher so that it actually does point towards a peak.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's such a beautiful location, and I actually do like the processing that's happened, that he's done, the black and white processing. It's really nice tonal range, and yeah, and I suppose that's the key point there is work your scene, and when you get home, you've taken all your different shots, and you can really choose your keeper then.
I wonder how this would actually look as a different crop, Johnny, like a landscape crop instead of a portrait crop.
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
Because you don't know what's on the left or the right side, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's true.
You're right, Jay.
Yeah,
glad you guys made it back. I thought maybe you went on holiday or something.
Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah, we have network connectivity issues we need to work out. So.
We've had some issues lately. Sorry about that.
No, that's
all
okay.
Right.
So I just wonder which screen is being shared right now, Jay.
Can you guys? What can you guys see right now?
I'm seeing two of you.
Can you see the screen with the?
Yes.
Yes, I can. But is that the one that everyone else is seeing?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay,
I am the
cool.
controller,
All right.
so I think
All right,
that's
good.
what everyone else is seeing. You guys can look at the YouTube and find out. So.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. Sorry for that little glitch. All right, let's get back into it.
All right, one of my will drop out eventually because it'll lost connectivity. So. Yep. All right, cool. All right, next image, guys. So here's Jenny's image, and I'll go on first on this image. So can everybody see this?
Yep.
On their screen? All right. So now in this case, there is a leading line. It's very subtle. The total range of the images is awesome in here. I love the sort of a pastel or not saturated or less saturated look of the image. And you can see the leading line up here. And when I first saw this photograph as a thumbnail, that leading line almost disappeared. Because there isn't enough contrast between this leading line and its background, what happens is as the image gets smaller, all the contrast gets, and the leading line ends up disappearing. Mm-hmm. And that is what I found in this image, saying, hey, so from that perspective, it works, but I don't know. I guess it's up to the artist to decide how to process the photo. I would have selected a leading line with a higher contrast, or artificially added a little bit of contrast to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I would either brighten up or darken up that path just enough to make it pop a little bit. Other than that, though, I think this is a lovely shot. I really like the desaturated color choices. I like the texture in the sky. The sort of lightening of the sky around the building itself is really nice. There's a lot going for it.
I agree, Verena. And yeah, maybe darkening the foreground would be good. But did you guys see the other leading lines? The top of the hills on the left going towards the house, and then also the fence from the
Yeah.
left going in a little bit. You know,
Yep.
Yeah, but
those are
like I
quite
said,
strong.
that's true. I mean, you can consider them leading line, but they're so far away. They're in mid-range of the photo, and they don't really, to my mind, when I look at it, don't really make a leading line per se. And one can argue, but let's talk about if you guys are done. I wanted to show you the same effect, or tell me what you
Sort
guys
of
think
a
about it.
similar. No,
Yeah,
this is a
similar.
similar idea to exactly what Brent's talking about there. More leading lines in this shot. Go ahead, Jay.
So let's take a look at this shot. Now, I commented on this shot. Now, you can argue that there are leading lines that go from mountains to the valley, or this is a leading line, or this is a leading line, or this valley sort of forms a leading line. But they're all very small, and they're all very distant. None of these leading lines actually is prominent as this part of the image in the foreground. So when I first looked at this image, I say it's a poor example of leading line. The shot isn't bad, the exposure is good, the details are great, but from a perspective of leading line, would I call this a effective leading line image? Probably not. And that is also the reason why, if you look at Jenny's photos, these leading lines, to me, they don't form a leading line per se, because they're too far away, and they're a small part of a bigger object, just like this little valley is.
I think for me, Jay, the Jenny's image, those lines can work as a complement to the leading line in the foreground. Of course, if that line were more prominent, then it would, be a stronger element in the photo. I'd like to see it a stronger element in the photo. The leading lines that Brent mentioned, I think they could be used as a complement as long as they're not meant to be the primary leading lines. And I feel the same way about Alex's shot. It's a gorgeous location. The colors are amazing. But the lines, to me, aren't leading lines so much as they are complementary lines. They're lovely in the image. They don't necessarily pull me into it, not in a strong way.
Agreed.
So, Verena, what you're saying is a stronger leading line is either coming from the corners of the image, like bottom left, bottom right, top left, or top right, and going towards the point of interest, and basically the horizontal leading lines should be used as complementary leading lines.
No, that's not quite it. I think it depends on the image. I think that there's a certain I'm not sure exactly how to put this into words. I feel that because they're, as Jay said, they're small. They feel insignificant to the image. They don't define the image. Jenny's image, that leading line in the foreground, I want to walk along that path towards to the house, right? In Alex's image, there are leading lines. I won't argue that, but they don't feel as though they're welcoming me in, or as if they are a very dominant part of the image. They're not filling up a large percentage of the frame or anything like that. I think the most effective leading lines that we've found in these images, they tend to dominate the frame. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In terms of contrast and in terms of size, they dominate the frame.
So if you go up, Jay, if you look at some of the from the first set, when we talk about an image that's about leading lines, the shot from a deal, the lines are they're coming in from every angle, so it's not the angle that matters, but they're so much a part of the image. I mean, they almost fill the entire image. The whole image is full of leading lines. They cross from, one area almost to the center in pretty much every case. The same goes for Vizarian's image and Michael's image as well. He has a very large part of the frame that's dedicated to those leading lines. Whereas in Alex's image, the lines are part of the image, but they aren't a dominant part of the image. They're I guess to me it almost feels like I'm thinking to myself, okay, I need to find an image with leading lines in it, and then I go to search for it, rather than actually using the leading lines in nature while I'm preparing my shot, and saying, I'm going to use these lines to pull my viewer in as a powerful tool to pull you into the image. Here, those leading lines feel like, oh yeah, there are some lines, and they actually happen to point to my subject. Does that make sense?
This makes total sense. And I've got a question for you guys. If, say, you've got a sunset or something over the water, and you've got a log that's pointing directly at the sunset, do you tend to go one way one way, so the leading line is from your left going in, or do you tend to go the other way from your right going in? Because I tend to go from my left, maybe because I'm, read left to right. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or we go in from center when it's necessary. It just depends on the composition. There is no set rules that we follow for that.
Right. For me, it comes down to balance. So I look at the other elements in the frame. If there's a bit of land on the left, that log is going to come in from the right. If it's reversed, I'm going to do that, because otherwise I get a heavy or unbalanced image. It's heavy on one side or it's unbalanced overall. So I'll use that leading line from the left or from the right or whatever it is, depending on where the image feels most balanced to me. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think this is, so there is no set criteria that we follow. We just follow the criteria that we, it depends on the elements of the scene, local elements. All right, so I'm going to go to the last image over here, and right now I will let you go for this one since I went to another one.
Yeah.
So this is Matthew's image. Now, I'll let you start the discussion on that.
Okay. I love this shot as a portrait. I just think it's really beautiful. There's a connection between the two subjects. They're looking, towards each other and holding hands, walking together. It's really nice. It's not just looking out at the frame or at the viewer, out of the frame at the viewer. So that really works well for me. I love the fog behind. It's awesome, and not what you expect a lot of times from your typical portrait session, right? So I love that. I feel like the fence posts on the right are they're cut off too much, so I feel like they should either be removed from the image completely, or I'd like to see more of them. They feel like a bit of an afterthought. And then as for the path on the, I guess underfoot, the issue I find with it is that although it is a leading line, it leads me past my subject and out into the back of the image. So I don't see anything wrong with it. It works. It's lovely. But at the same time, I don't see it as a leading line in this image, simply because it doesn't take me to my subject. It takes me away from it. Yeah.
So I was going to ask a question to Johnny and Brent. What do you think is the leading line in the image? Is it the path or is it the fence?
The path to me, Jay. But what I would say is Matthew should, next time, because I'm a portrait photographer, is bend your knees, get really low so that the fence is above your eye level, and then the fence would actually lead into the subject, and the pathway would actually go back. But when it comes to the actual image or the subjects, he's done a really great job. I like the connection between their heads looking at each other. And then also, I was just thinking of this the other day when I was photographing adults on the beach, is especially with a woman when she's walking, man, you definitely do want to get those ankles crossing like that, because that shows the curves of a lady, which is great when you're photographing. So he's caught it at the right moment. I just say bend your knees, buddy, and move back a little bit.
Oh, that's great advice. See, that's something I would not have thought to say. That's why we need Brent around to help us with photos like this. Awesome input, Brent.
All right, so let's go back to the leading line question here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I picked this image, and in my opinion, is not a very effective image from a leading lines perspective. Great portrait, like Glenn said. Mm-hmm. But from a leading lines perspective, I would not put it as a very effective image. I would like to see this if I was to make a leading line, and let's say this path is a leading line, I would position this couple up here, somewhere up in the frame, so that there is a longer portion of the leading line dominant in front of them, or get down low and create the same effect. But what it does is, right now, one of the things is not only does the leading line go past them, but the one that is in the foreground, I mean the leading line that is in front of the point of interest is very short.
Well, it actually goes right between them.
It
separates them a little bit, which
and
kind
it's
of
also very short.
Yes.
So what happens is, to me, when I looked at the photo, I was like, where is the leading line? I had to think for myself, because a short single leading line doesn't grab your viewer's attention as a leading line assignment leading line assignment.
Right.
So, all right, I think this brings us to the end of our presentation. Great set of images, very, very nicely done. Next time, the assignment is seasonal colors. It's autumn over here, and spring down under, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, thank goodness.
So yeah, we our first thought was, Jay said, "Oh, it's getting to be autumn. Let's do autumn colors." And I said, "We can't do autumn colors because our partners are down in Australia, but we can do seasonal colors." So
Yeah,
there you go.
good idea, Rena. I like it.
Right? Or we don't want to be too U.S. centric.
Correct. So anyway, I think we should say goodbye and let everybody go, and we'll put this episode up hopefully next week.
Yep.
Awesome. Guys, I don't know, can I do a little quick plug for the focus courses?
Oh, yes.
Make sure you jump on to visualwilderness.com and check out the 2 brand new courses all about focus. Focus, focus, focus.
Yeah, that's what we have been working on for the past few months. Jay and I are, our eyes are blurred with focus issues because we've been staring at the screen. So we have sacrificed our eyesight for you.
Awesome.
All right.
Cool.
So thanks everybody
Right,
for coming out tonight. Thanks Brent. Thanks Johnny. Thanks Jay.
Good night, guys. Thanks for watching.
Good night.
Thank you, guys, and goodbye, and see you next time around.